My name is Robert Whited. I'm 84 years old and still young.
So how did you come about joining the military? Can you tell me about what branch you joined, your specialty, unit, all the information?
Well, I originally joined the Marine Corps in 1947, May of 1947. While I was still in high school, I enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserve, Treasure Island, and it was an infantry battalion, so my initial field was infantry. And then after August of 1948, I enlisted in the regular Marine Corps and attended recruit training at MCRD San Diego. Following recruit training, I was assigned to the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade on Guam, and we stayed out there for about a year and a half before we had a serious typhoon. But at that time I was a squad leader, a corporal in the infantry company in B Company, 5th Marines. And during that period we were on Guam, we spent most of our time training in one off-island training exercise in the Northern Marianas. In January 1950, we were reassigned back to Camp Pendleton after the typhoon, and that as a brigade then they were formed up, and that's when we had 3 battalions. At that time we were 1 battalion, and looking back in retrospect, I think that had it not been for the typhoon, we would have been in Korea in June of 1950. From my recollection and everything, I think we were probably the best well-trained unit in the Marine Corps at the time, and in the military in general. So we were ready to go, but we came back to Camp Pendleton, and the brigade was formed up, and then in July of 1950 we were mounted out and sent to Korea to help plug the gap, if you will. We were supposed to stop in Japan on the way over, but things were so critical in Korea at the time we couldn't stop. We had to go straight to Busan and offload and get into the front lines. So on August the 7th of 1950 we went into combat with the North Korean Army. Matter of fact, it was I think designed to be that way, since August the 7th, 1942 was the first landing of the Marines on Guadalcanal. So I think it was kind of a one of those things we want to stay within the history of the operation. So we went into operation at Maison-Ni, and that was our first engagement with the North Koreans. And from there we went on to the Naktong Bulge, which we called the Naktong Bulge at the time. It was apparently one of the weakest points in the perimeter around Busan at the time, and the 4th North Korean Army Division was probably their best apparently, but the Army couldn't handle them, so we went up there and took care of it. Not on one occasion, but 2 occasions. And then after we left the Naktong the first time, we went back around to Maison, and we had what we called an area called the Bean Patch, where we had our encampments and all that for the rear area to reform and do whatever we needed to do. And then we made an offensive. We moved 27 miles up to Seishan, up the west coast, and then we got diverted from that back to the Naktong Bulge again, and the North Korean division had penetrated and ran the Army had to pull back And apparently these folks had just been into Korea shortly, a few weeks, or not even that, I guess, but at any rate, we had to go back up there again, and it was a costly operation for us in that we lost quite a few men in retaking that terrain. But thank goodness we did, and all I can think of are two big things. We captured a North Korean officer, and the North Korean officer had two things to say. He wanted to know he wanted to see our automatic artillery. Well, needless to say, with the 1st Brigade, we didn't have a very large artillery unit at that time, at 13 guns. And he wanted to see the automatic artillery. And the other thing was, he made a comment, was that his men could not fight the men with the yellow canvas leggings. And that the yellow canvas leggings were the Marine Corps. We were the only ones that wore those at the time. So that was a fine comment from our enemy to let us know that they can't fight us, which was really enough to puff up the chest. But that's what we did. And then after that, we went back to the bean patch and got ready to go to Incheon, to make the landing at Incheon. And after our Incheon landing, our first day would be, or the first night, we landed after 5 o'clock. We had to land at that particular time because the tide was high in the evening. And I was in the 4th wave in to climb over the wall and up to the unit I was with. We went up to what was called Embassy Hill, and took Embassy Hill, spent the night there, and had some contact. It was light, but not a whole lot. And then the following day, we proceeded on toward Seoul. And we were about probably 5 kilometers out of Incheon when we encountered a fairly large North Korean unit and 3 tanks. They didn't realize what they were getting into and the way we were set up, but at any rate, we eliminated them. And then the classic thing was Douglas MacArthur came up to witness the operation, and typically he was there right after the last shot was fired. But anyway, we saw that, enjoyed seeing MacArthur up there, being the showman that he is, or was. And then we proceeded on toward Kimpo Air Base, and when we got to Kimpo, it was after dark, and my unit, for whatever reason, we got separated and set up in a location all by our lonesome. And at night, we could hear talking going on, and it was the North Korean Army was members were trying to flee north, and they were actually came upon us and surprised us as well. And since it was only a platoon-sized unit, and moved on up to towards Seoul, and ultimately moved into Seoul, and I don't recall exactly the location that we were at. All I can say is we were on a high piece of ground in Seoul with a wall that goes up a mountainside, and I do remember that. And we did have some contact there. And then after we finished in Incheon, we moved back to, at Seoul, we moved back to Incheon, regrouped, went aboard ship, and then moved around to Wonsan. And when we got to Wonsan, we were delayed on our landing because the waters around Wonsan had been heavily mined, and probably one of the most heavily mined harbors ever, from what we understood. And when we got into Wonsan, what was classic about the whole thing, Bob Hope had been there the day before, and had given a show for the 1st Marines, who moved up the coast. And then we landed, got aboard trains and went up to Hung Nam, and from Hung Nam we moved off the 5th Marines, the unit that I was in. We did not go up to the Chosin Reservoir right away. We were assigned another location, which was more northwesterly or northeasterly out of Hung Nam, and went up to an area just short of the Yalu River, and we were running patrols there and encountered our first Chinese, and we didn't know what they were at the time. Had no briefings or anything as to what we were going to encounter. But anyway, we moved from there on around and did go up to the reservoir at that point and set up on the east side of the reservoir, and then moved around to Udamni, and we were assigned a roadblock position outside of Udamni, about 3 kilometers, when the Chinese hit us. And then we pulled back into Udamni, and then proceeded to continue the fight there until we moved back to Hagaru and on back to Coterie and down back to the seashore. But I do recall several thousand refugees that we had with us. Unfortunately, we couldn't put them inside the perimeter, but they were right outside the rear guard, but we could still take care of them. And we took them back to Hung Nam, and with the shipping and everything, we had one ship that I was aboard, which was a cargo ship, a civilian cargo ship, and we loaded a lot of the refugees aboard the ship and took them back to Busan with us. And I think that that was probably one of the greatest things we ever did. I couldn't visualize leaving those folks up there in that cold weather without anything and nothing but a lot of Chinese around. So we did that and went back to Busan and reformed and reorganized.
When you were coming to Korea, what was it like to you? What did it mean to you?
Well, when we were leaving for Korea, I think at the time we were at Camp Pendleton, and we were kind of rushed into it, and most of us looked at it as, well, it's a job, let's go do it. And I don't recall anybody that had any negative thoughts on it. We just knew that we were loading up and leaving Pendleton, and we had to get there as quickly as we possibly could. So I myself, I thought, well, it's what I get paid to do, so we'll go do it. And same thing with the men in my unit. We were all thinking the same thing. And I don't know, maybe when the first shot was fired, I think maybe there were some different thoughts going through people's minds, but I think for the most part the morale was very high, and we knew we had a purpose in what we were there for. And thank goodness we were able to do what we did to save as much as we could of Korea.
How old were you then?
I was 20 years old.
Well, how about your family? What did they say about it?
Well, it was priceless. I was home on leave at the time when we were recalled, and I received a call from the Western Union in the morning and telling me to report back to Camp Pendleton ASAP as quickly as possible. And of course my mother said, well, I'll call the Marine Corps and tell them you're not here. I said, no, you're not going to call the Marine Corps and tell them I'm not here. It's my unit, I'm going with them. And she wasn't too happy about that, but that was the way it was. And I got back down to Pendleton, and we had a lot of new faces in the unit, men that were brought in from Marine barracks all over the country to fill the ranks. But no, my mother, she was willing to go the full mile to try to keep me from going. But I just told her I was going to stay with the units I've been trained with, that I've been with for a year and a half. So.
You already described to me the different battles that ensued, but if we can also talk more about details about the conditions, how was the living condition when you arrived in Korea?
Well, we started out, we didn't have a whole lot. We just set up in an encampment. Well, I'll go back. I'll refer to the bean patch because it's right outside of Maison-Ni. And we set up our encampment there to get ready to go into the front lines. And our conditions at the time were that we had our ponchos and things of that sort. So we didn't set up any permanent type tents or anything of that nature. Time didn't permit that. So we had our ponchos and laid out on the ground until we were moved up to Maison, which was just a few kilometers up the road. So primarily we didn't have much in the line of anything of comfort through, I'd say, through the whole operation at Busan. We didn't have time for it. We were on the move all the time. So aside from putting up with the heat, it was unbearable sometimes, but when the conditions were what they were, you don't think about that. You got other things to worry about, and the heat wasn't one of them.
Did you have a certain expectation of how it was going to be like, and then how was it actually?
Well, when we were aboard ship, we did get some briefings, but they were sketchy because at that time no one really had a full understanding of what was going on, other than the fact that South Korea had been invaded, and the maps and everything that we had to go by were probably World War II style type maps, but fairly accurate, but not accurate enough that we needed other information. Plus, the intelligence was sketchy. Again, no one really knew what was going on because things were happening so fast. All you knew was, well, the Army's retreated another 20 miles or whatever. And when we got to Busan, it was 5 o'clock in the evening when we tied up, and they moved us right from there up to the front to Maison right away. And we went to, as I say, to the bean patch. We reformed, and the following day we went into Maison and got involved in the combat end of it. So, having said that, we never really had full intelligence of what was happening, no matter where we went, whether it was Incheon or the Chosun Reservoir up in there. We had no clue at the time. So we kind of flew by the seat of our pants, you know, in a lot of instances. But sometimes you can do that and still do a good job. And you do the things that you've been trained to do, and normally you're going to come out okay. As a matter of fact, our interaction with the Korean folks was pretty minute because of the situation and being on the move all the time. We never had that opportunity. And of course, the Korean folks, they were taking care of their things, and we were trying to do what we could to keep them from being harmed in any way. So our interaction at that time was, in the time that I was in Korea, was very minor.
Any foreign troops that you encountered during allies or?
No. The bulk of the Allied forces came in after Incheon, and at that time we were already up going to the Chosin Reservoir, and most of those foreign troops were in the Central Front and on the Western Front. And on our side, it was just the 1st Marine Division and the Army's 10th Division, or 7th Division it was. So we had no interaction with them. There were Korean Army folks with the 7th Army Division, but none with us.
Headed to Busan, and aboard the ship there were so many civilians that you were able to take with you, and you said that would be one of your most proud moments.
It's one of the highlights of the operation, yes. But I think when it all comes down to it, I think we can be proud of the fact that we were able to get those folks out, get them back to South Korea, and let them become productive. And I have to say that they've done a remarkable job, and I can say we helped them get there, thank goodness. And the only regrets we have is the fact that we couldn't have taken North Korea back too. If it hadn't been for the Chinese, we would have, and there wouldn't be a North Korea today. Looking back, we were all pretty cold, I can say that. And our clothing, we were semi-prepared for cold weather. Our parkas and things like that. Unfortunately, the boots that we had were not, they were jungle warfare boots. They weren't cold weather boots. And that's why a lot of the men had frozen feet and that. They had felt pads in them, and when your feet perspire, then and stand in the ice and that, when it's 30, 35 below zero, of course they had problems. But also looking at the refugees, I had an opportunity to see them when we were on the rear guard. They were really bundled up as best they could be with what they had and all their possessions and everything. So I know that they were experiencing some real serious problems, as were everybody up there for that matter. But I have to hand it to them. They were resilient and tough, and by golly, they made it. That's the important thing.
Do you recall any like facial expressions? Were they like crying? Were they kind of maybe just silent and just kind of moving with the crowd?
Well, no, we never really got that close to them. Unfortunately, we had to keep them back far enough so that, you know, they wouldn't get hurt if we had an encounter with the Chinese. So it was hard to see. The only place that I really saw them up close was when we were aboard ship, and then they kind of kept us separated from them because we were being security for the Korean people. And I know that looking at them that they were really miserable and hungry and everything. And I do recall one thing, while we were at the docks, they'd loaded aboard ship, and in this warehouse that was at the dock, we went down there, a few of the Marines, and lo and behold, this warehouse is full of food and candy and things of that sort. So we were going to take some, and this Army guard came around. He told us, he said, "You can't have that." And, well, we'll take it anyway because it's going to get burned. So what we did, we took as much as we could and gave it to the Korean folks, and they were down in the holes below. So at least we did something. But and they were appreciative of that. You could see the smiles, and they were all very thankful that we had them aboard ship and they were getting out of there.
Yeah.
So.
And so I saw you at the anniversary event a few months back, and the Korean lady, came to give a speech because she was she was a little girl when she aboard the ship. I mean, you don't remember her, do you?
Oh no, no.
Yeah.
She was 8 years old, and it would be hard to remember any of them, to be truthful with you, because as I say, we were up topside on the decks, and they were down in the warmer portions of the hold, so it was very hard to see them. And I would just look down, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nice to see her and be part of what she is today, getting her out of North Korea, and that. Just amazing how far she's gone. But it's amazing too that the Korean people have done just wonderful things, and I'm happy to say that I've been part of it, getting it. Too bad we just didn't get the North Koreans on our side too.
Yeah. For those that didn't attend the anniversary event, how was it meeting her? What was she like, and how was it meeting her? What kind of conversations did you have, if you can share?
Well, we had a limited conversation, but it was very nice meeting her, and you know, being able to be part of her freedom, and that, and she was very appreciative and thankful for what we did, and I just couldn't ask for anything more. I think that was enough, just to be able to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other kind of rather happy memories during the war?
Well, I don't think you can have too many happy things in a war, but looking at back to Naktong River, I'd say probably, as hard as it was a happy moment that we were able to plug that gap and preserve Pusan and the rest of that area. And of course, the guys all thought the same way. The brigade, the 1st Provisional Marine Brigade, we were dispatched to Korea post haste. As a matter of fact, things were ready to collapse over there, and we got over to Pusan. We went straight from San Diego to Pusan, and when we got there, things were very critical. It was at that time that they were, well, the North Korean Army was pressing hard on the Army, and the Marine Corps. We arrived and were sent right into combat at the not the Naktong River the first few days, but we had to go up there the second, and that's when things were very critical at that time, and that's why the 1st Marine Brigade had to get there as quickly as possible.
What would you say, if I asked you, what was your worst memory from the war? What comes to mind?
I think our worst memory would have to be the Chosin Reservoir, in that we got up there and had very little intelligence, had no idea what we were encountering, and we were supposed to, Marine Corps, we were supposed to link up with the Army over on the West Coast with the 8th Army. When we got hit with well over 100,000 Chinese, then we knew what it was. But I have to say that the Marine Corps, we didn't just lay down. We turned around and fought our way out. And I'd say that was probably the worst moment, where we really lost a lot of our men. I guess at that time I just said, you reach down and grab the bootstraps and pull them up and say, look, we have a job to do, and you don't worry about anything else. You worry about getting out and hoping that everything worked out well.
Wow, how are you able to be so resilient? How are you able to have that strong heart?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. You do funny things when you're under pressure. And I think that you change your thinking, the way you think, and you just concentrate on what you have to do and keep the morale up and remember who you belong to.
Do you think you could speak for other members in the troop, or do you think you were kind of unique in that sense?
No, I think when you get down to it, in the group that I was in, we were probably a more mature group. We'd been together for a long time and had been training on Guam and all of that, so we had plenty of time to prepare for things like this. And when you have a cadre made up of World War II veterans as your leaders and all that, like, it was very easy to make the transition over. So it never entered my mind to even worry about that. Just worry about the day-to-day operation and the way we did business, and that was it.
And during that time, were you able to contact home?
Oh yes, we were able to write letters home and receive mail. Took a while, but we were able to communicate.
How did you write in the letter? Do you recall?
Sometimes it was hard.
Yeah.
You know, to sit down, you try to let your family know you're okay, everything's fine, and you try not to tell them what's going on, because sometimes you can't do that.
Yeah.
But I tried to say a little bit, but kind of an appetizer, but not enough to tell them how things were and some of the bad battles that we had, things of that sort. But yeah, you just let them know that, hey, I'm doing great, wonderful, send a care package.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't all that hard. No, I did the same thing in Vietnam.
Was it kind of, I mean, I always hear about, you know, soldiers during the war writing letters, but I'm just wondering, I mean, for me, it's like, how do you actually sit down and take the time to write? But was it like enough time? Did you always have enough time to like sit and write? Was it kind of like a chore or something? Like they had you, okay, writing time, and you guys, okay, you have 1 minute, or how was it? Or you like found a corner and you like reflected and you wrote and then you sent that letter to the family?
Well, most of the time, when we were writing, would be when we went back to the rear areas off the front lines. And then you could sit down and you could write letters. You had all kinds of time there. And so I'd sit down and just kind of try to relate what was going on without, as I say, upsetting people, because it's very difficult. Sometimes a person will write a letter that doesn't mean to write, and let their emotions override their thinking train. And then it looks so bad when it really isn't that bad. And again, I just tried to be realistic and tell it like it was, and not tell about the bad parts. Leave that to historians to tell that stuff. And families get terribly upset when they see things like that, where they don't know what's going on. And I think the later on, especially in the Vietnam War, that was on television every day. In Korea, what you saw from us was probably once a week on the national news, and the folks would get a chance to see a little bit of it. But no, I just tried not to. I tried to keep everything on a positive side. Let them know that, look, I'm doing fine. Everything is great. Don't worry, so on. But they're still going to worry no matter what.
And how about the letters that you received? What were they like? What kind of content did they have?
They were the ones that said, well, I'm glad to hear you're doing well, and so on and so forth, and what's happening over there, whatever, you know. And again, I can only say that I try not to tell them what's going on because then they really worry.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, well, the guy, Bob's going to get hurt or this or
Right.
that, you know. Basically, that was it.
Then just with your, I guess with your brothers with you, what else did you guys maybe talk about other than, you know, oh, we're in a war, you know, and when you're in action, maybe during downtimes, what was it like that life?
Well, we'd sit back when we were in the rear area and we'd think about Liberty and Hollywood in San Diego and say, boy, those were the good old times. We'd like to do that again. And that was kind of a morale builder. At least you could talk about something, the roller skating rink in Hollywood and all of that. But basically, that's what we did. We just talked about the good times.
I'm sure you do. You think about the war and what happened there. Can you tell me about that?
I think back sometimes, not all that often anymore since it's been such a long time. I think about some of the things that occurred. Then I think, well, you know, it was a great experience. And I think about some of my old buddies, my friends, and wonder where they are now, and what they're doing, if they're still living. And pretty much in general, too much doesn't come to mind anymore, unless I see something on television that shows the Korean War, which is rare these days. And that's probably why they call it the Forgotten War. They just don't remember that we went over there. So I don't think about it all that much anymore.
I remember reading and just listening to like radios or, you know, like segments that talk about the Korean War and how they didn't want you guys to talk about it. Was that true?
I've never heard of that.
Okay.
It's something new. I don't know of anything, whether it be the Korean War, Vietnam, Afghanistan, or any of those places that they don't want you to talk about it. It might be one of those situations where you have a person who was in some sort of a clandestine operation or a special operation type thing, but I don't recall anything in Korea where we had anything of that type, at least in the Marine Corps. I don't know if the Army may have had it, but we certainly didn't have it.
What would you do if you were young and another war started in the region?
Well, if I was a young guy, again, I'd do the same thing over. I don't think I would do anything differently. Be the same old thing, get right out there and do what we're being paid to do.
And have you been back to Korea since then?
I've been back one time on a training exercise when I was in the 9th Marines on Okinawa. We went to Korea for a training exercise. We were over there 2 weeks and went into Pohang, which was one of the places that we were at during the Korean War. Matter of fact, I can go back to Pohang. We went there from the bean patch before we went up to the Central Front in and around Wonju. But it was nice to go back and see how things were, even though it was a training exercise and you didn't get much of an opportunity to do anything but train. But still, it was nice to kind of recall what it was like there way back in 1950.
Mm-hmm. And what year was the training exercise?
We were there in 1961.
And since then, you haven't been to Korea?
No.
Yeah. Do you plan on going, visiting?
Well, I'm thinking about it this year, to see if the Korean Marine House is going to run any more of their trips to South Korea, and if they do, I'm thinking time is getting short, so maybe I'll try it this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, you haven't been back, but I'm sure you've seen on TV and you hear stories about how it is now.
Oh,
So, yeah, how do you feel about that?
yes. I think it's great, you know, that you can look back and say, well, this is what it was in 1950. Look what it is today. It's one of the most modern, productive countries in the world. And I think about it, that we were a part of it, and by golly, I'm proud to say that we did. And proud to say that the South Korean people stand on their 2 feet and can be as productive as they are, and all the modern facilities they have. And it's good to see that, even though I see it on television occasionally, but I say, we're part of that.
Right, right. Even here in Carlsbad and San Diego, there's a lot of Koreans and Korean businesses, restaurants. Have you been to a Korean restaurant locally?
No, but we have in Los Angeles. My son's wife is Korean, and her mother and I live up in the Los Angeles area, and we've been up there to several Korean functions and that, and it's very nice. I love it. A chance to get in and get with the people.
Does your son's wife have a lot of knowledge about the Korean War? Do you ever talk?
No, she doesn't. Her mother, well, I'll go back to her mother. Sabrina, she has no knowledge about the war to speak of, or at least she hasn't mentioned it to me. But her mother was born in Seoul, and I think she was born after the Korean War. But at any rate, she's still very much into the Korean culture and government and everything. And it's nice to just interact with them and that. So basically that's about all I have as far as, you know, getting with Korean folks. Here in the county, not much.
For me, now that I'm more engaged and familiar with the veterans, you know, because I know Gene and I've been to the Chosin Few meetings and all that, if I see maybe a car with like a sticker that says, you know, Korean War veteran, or if I see a gentleman wearing like a hat with a Korean War sign on it, it makes me want to, like, I don't know, like talk to them or acknowledge that, or, you know, something like that. It's different for me now. I changed in that sense. Before I didn't have any, you know, awareness or any feelings towards that. So I wonder how it is for you. Do you also have that? If you see someone like walking down the street and with like a jacket or something that has an emblem, like do you feel an urge to like talk to them?
Well, yes, I do. And they're quite often, though, you find that, or at least I do, most of them, they walk by and they're not interested in saying anything. And I find that to be pretty common, even today, with other military people or former military people. And sometimes you feel a little reluctant to really say something to them, or even attempt to. Most of them don't want to talk to you anyway, those that I've found. So I figure, well, if they don't want to talk to me, that's fine. I don't talk to them either.
Why don't they want to talk?
I don't know what it is. I think sometimes they're so absorbed in something else, or they're looking off in the distance, and they're not interested. I can go to Starbucks, and I'll see maybe one or two around there on occasion, not always, and they're not paying any attention. They don't care. You can have a Marine Corps emblem emblazoned on your chest from shoulder to shoulder, and they still don't seem to be too interested. And I don't know, maybe that's the way it is after this many years.
Anything that you want to say to people that will listen to this interview, and the younger people, future generation, any special message that you want to tell them?
I would tell them that no matter what you get out of this film or this message, always think positive. Don't look back and see all the bad things, and give yourself a roadmap to get ahead. And that's most important, and not to sit back and relax and say, well, I can't do it, because there's no such thing as can't. You can always do something, and make sure that what you do is positive.
In just a few words, just a few sentences, how can you best describe the legacy of the Korean War veterans?
I would say that the Korean War veterans are probably, we can stand as tall and as proud as anybody going today, no matter what war has taken place since then. And I think that the men who fought in the Korean War were much more mature, if you will, than they are today. Even back when we were 18, 19 years old, then we had people who were there who had been through a lot of serious things during World War II, so that kind of rubs off on you. So for whatever, look at the old folks, the guys that have been there before, and think what they went through, and just consider what you might go through in the future.
Then lastly, you said that when you think about the Korean War, you also think about your buddies, and some of them are maybe not here anymore. Let's say that, you know, you can send them a letter now to all your buddies, whether they're still living and, you know, you meet up with them, or they're now deceased. What do you want to say to them? Can you maybe do like a audio letter to them, send the audio greeting to them?
Well, I'm in contact with two of the men that were in my outfit in Korea. And we still communicate via email. So most generally we have our conversations are related to some, either a joke or whatever. Not a whole lot. We don't talk about the war anymore. If we go to the Chosun Few reunion, we get together. Now that I said there's only two of us left that I know of, there might be a couple more, but where they are, I don't know. If we could ever contact them, it would be great, whether it be by email or letter or telephone, whatever. But they're just far and few between anymore.
Yeah, when did you start going out to the veterans meetings?
Well, I've been going to this now, the Chosen Few, for probably about the last 13 years. When I realized we had a chapter here in town, one of my neighbors who passed away was in the 1st Brigade in the Chosen Few, and I used to walk by his house and I'd see his bumper stickers. So I asked him one day, I said, were you in the brigade? And of course, yes. Turned out that we were in the same battalion, but he was in a different company, and but then we got to know, and then he mentioned the Chosen Few, so I started coming to this. And I still go to reunions for the company that I commanded in Vietnam during that war in 1970. And so those reunions I go to. That's about it. I don't go to the VFW or the American Legion or any of those. It's not that I don't have any desire to do it. There's so many reunions and they all run together. You have to pick and choose which one you want to go to. So I normally go to the ones like the Chosen and Golf Company 2-7 because we're close, and we have stayed that way through the years. And if I got someplace else, I might find someone I know, but not in any big rush to go.
Anything else that you want to say? We talked already for like about an hour, but if there is anything more that you want to add. please feel free.
No, I can't think of anything that we haven't already covered. And looking back through the years, just trying to.
Do you think it's important to for the younger people to know about this?
I think that they should view the Korean War as a good jump-off point for what's happened today. That was our first encounter with communism in 1950, and I don't think at that time people realized that that was going to be the major crux of everything that we're involved in today, no matter what it is. It may not be communist, but it could be Muslim or whatever. It's still the same thing, you know, when you get right down to it. So my advice would be pay close attention, because things are changing, and if you don't contribute to stopping some of this stuff, then you can only live with what you get.
Perhaps last words could be to the group that is doing this project of collecting all the veterans across the U.S., all their stories. Maybe just a word of encouragement from you for them. It's Professor Han in Syracuse, New York, and his colleagues and students.
I would tell them this: do a great job, tell it like it is, tell it like it was, and don't be afraid. Your stories are probably ones that have never been told, and most generally some of you people don't want to talk about it, but my advice is loosen up and tell the story like it is, and people will appreciate it a whole lot more when they know what actually happened.